Good day, everybody. I hope that you're well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. So, today we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on sentences, fragments, and run ons. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English Language Arts, grade 8. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of sentences, fragments, and run-ons. All right. So our chapter is sentences, fragments, and run-ons. Our subject is English Language Arts, grade 8, and the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of sentences, fragments, and run-ons is it a complete sentence or fragment, or is it a complete sentence or a run-on? All right. So a sentence, right, is a group of words that forms a complete thought, right? And and with a sentence, right, a sentence needs to have both subject as well as a verb, and basically one subject, one verb, unless it's of course two people that is doing something but doing one thing, right? So it needs to have a subject as well as a verb. And like I say, the subject can either be Nadine and Jack, Nadine and Anna, jumps something or goes to the shop, but it basically needs to have a subject or subjects as well as a verb, and that is a sentence, which is a group of words that forms a complete thought. All right, and if we look at an example, right, of a sentence that is a group of words that forms a complete thought and has both subject as well as a verb, Here we have an example of that sentence. It says, my friends walk along the path. So my friends walk along the path, right? So if we were to identify the subject as well as the verb within that sentence, right? Then my friends or friends would be the subject. I'm going to put S for subject. And walk would be the verb. And there we have both subject as well as verb within that sentence. So that shows a complete thought, which means that this is a sentence. Right. Then we have a sentence fragment, right? And a sentence fragment is a group of words that does not express a complete thought. So, a sentence fragment is a group of words, but it does not express a complete thought, right? And with a sentence fragment, it is either missing a subject or it's missing a verb, or it can even be missing a helping verb. And if we look at an example, right, or examples, and then we can say knows the answer. So knows is a verb, but now as we can see, there is no subject. So there's no subject, but there's a verb. So knows the answer. But now the question is who knows the answer? So that is basically the question that we need to ask ourselves. Who knows the answer? All right. And that, like we said, it's missing a subject. Then we have the bright red car. So the bright red car. And if we look at that specific sentence that says the bright red car, and then we can say that car is our subject, right? Bright red, it basically just describes the car. So which means that over here, it's not telling us what the car is doing, right? We don't know what the car is doing. It's not telling us what the car is doing, which means that there is no verb. So it's missing a verb, right? And remember, we said that in order for us to show a complete sentence, it needs to have both subject as well as a verb. All right. And then we have another one that is we skiing next week. We skiing next week. And if we look at something that is missing, right, Then over here, next to we and skiing, right? There we are missing something. So we either saying we are skiing next week, right? But it is missing a helping verb. So there's no helping verb. So which means that if it's either missing a subject, it's missing a verb, or it's missing a helping verb, then we say that this is a sentence fragment. And then we also have a run-on sentence, right? So we have a run-on sentence. We had a sub-sentence where we say that a sentence is a group of words that forms a complete thought, and it has a subject as well as a verb. And then we went over a sentence fragment, right? That is a group of words and it does not express a complete thought. We say that a sentence fragment is either missing a subject, or it's missing a verb, or it's missing a helping verb within a specific sentence, right? So it's not showing a complete thought because it's either missing one of those things, which is either subject, there's no verb, or there's no helping verb. And then we have a run on sentence that is made up of two independent clauses. And these two independent clauses are joined without an end mark. So it's either joined without an end mark or it basically just has a comma. So it's either joined by a comma or it is joined without an end mark, right? So we have basically these two independent clauses which is in one specific sentence, right? So it's either there's no punctuation mark or in punctuation mark, or it is just a comma to join that or to show that it's basically joining that two sentences. And here we have an example. This is an example of a sentence with that is joined without an in punctuation. It says, I knocked on the door, it opened. And as you can see, this too, it says, I knocked on the door, it opened. That is basically two independent clauses. There's one, there's the other, right? But there is no in punctuation mark to separate those two. So it is written as one sentence, right? But we are going to fix it. But for now, that basically just shows that there's two independent clauses and there's no in punctuation. Then the next one is it started raining. There we have the one. We ran inside. That is the second sentence, right? And that is joined by a comma. It's joined by a comma. But we are going to fix our run-on sentence, right? By either adding our in punctuation mark, right, to both of those sentences. All right, so if we want to fix our run-on sentences, so in order for us to fix our run-on sentences, all right, so in order to fix our run-on sentences, we need to either separate it into two sentences, and there I already drew lines under each one of the sentences, and I put either one for the first sentence and I put two for the second sentence. So we need to fix the run-on sentence by separating it into two sentences. Once we separated it into two sentences, then we are going to add our in punctuation after the first sentence, and then we're also going to capitalize the second sentence, right? And then also add our in punctuation at the end. And in order for us to fix the sentence, right, there we separated it. Yes, now we write it like this. It says, I knocked on the door, period. there we have our in punctuation, because that is already a sentence on its own. That's the first sentence on its own. It open. We start with a capital letter and it ends with a period, and that is our second sentence. The same with this one, right? Remember, it was joined with a comma, but now we are separating that two sentences and writing it as an independent sentence or clause. It says, it started raining, and there we have our period. We ran inside. There we have our second sentence. Right? So that is how we basically fix our sentence by separating it into two sentences. And by us separating it into two sentences, we then had to add our in punctuation after the first sentence. And in the start of the second sentence, we had to capitalize. And then, of course, at the end, also add our in punctuation mark. So that is one way in which you can fix a run-on sentence. But you can also fix a run-on sentence, right, by rewriting it as a compound sentence. And a compound sentence, right, is made up of two independent clauses, right? So it's made up of two independent clauses that is joined by a comma as well as a coordinating conjunction. And our coordinating conjunctions are words such as and, but, or, and so. And if we look at how we have basically how we can rewrite it into a compound sentence, right? This is now the very same sentence that we use. I knocked on the door, it opened, or it started raining, we ran inside. So we can then write it by, as a compound sentence, joined by a comma as well as a coordinating conjunction, either and, but, or so. By saying, I knocked on the door, that's a one sentence, comma, and it opened. And there we use the word and to join that two independent clauses. The next one says, it started raining, comma, so we ran inside. And there we also use so, the coordinating conjunction so, to join that two sentences. All right. So before we go on to A plus students.ca, right, we are going to do the lesson of, is it a complete sentence or fragment? Is it a complete sentence or run-on? We say that a sentence is a group of words that forms a complete thought. And it has both subject as well as a verb. And then we have a sentence fragment, right? Which is a group of words that does not express a complete thought, but it usually is missing. So with a sentence fragment, it's either missing a subject, missing a verb, or missing a helping verb, meaning there's either no subject within that sentence, no verb within that sentence, or no helping verb within that sentence. And then we have a run-on sentence, which is made up of two independent clauses that is joined without and in punctuation, or it is joined with just a comma. And we can fix our run-on sentence by separating that two independent sentences, by adding our in punctuation after the first sentence, and then the start of the second sentence, we can capitalize it. And or we can also fix our run-on sentence by rewriting it as a compound sentence. And a compound sentence is made up of two independent clauses joined by a comma as well as a conjunction, which is and, but, or, also. That is also how we can fix it. All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca, grade 8, and we are going to do the chapter of sentences, fragments, and run-ons. So we're going into the first one, which says, is it a complete sentence or a fragment? So is it a complete sentence or a fragment? All right. So I'm not going to go over what a sentence and a fragment is again because I went over it about 3, 4 times already. So let's look at the sentence. It says, a long pleated skirt with a floral print. Or news reports alerted everyone in the area to the approaching tornado. So we need to choose which sentence is a fragment. Do we say a long pleated skirt with a floral print is a fragment? Or do we say news reports alerted everyone in the area to the approaching tornado? We need to choose our sentence fragment. Sentence fragment does not express a complete thought. It's either missing a subject, it's missing a verb, or it's missing a helping verb. All right, and if we were to choose our correct sentence, right, and then we would say it is a long pleated skirt with the floral print, right? So it's missing a verb. All right, let's go to our test. We are going to say if it is a sentence or a fragment, right? All right, the first one says, which is a sentence fragment? A sentence fragment. Is it option one? News reports alerted everyone in the area to the approaching tornado. Or option two, wiped the sweat from her brow after sprinting across the finish line. All right, then if we were to choose the correct option, right, which is our sentence fragment, and then we will choose option two. Wiped the sweat from her brows after sprinting across the finish line. They're not saying who or what wiped the sweat from her brows after sprinting to the finish line. The next one says we need to say which is a complete sentence which has both subject as well as a verb. And it says electric eels stun prey with an intensive electric charge. Or Pamela fulfilling her dream of hiking to the top of Mount St. Helena's. St. Helens, sorry. All right, and if we were to show or identify our complete sentence, right, within that sentence, and remember we said that a sentence has both subject as well as a verb, and it expresses a complete thought, then we would go with option two, which is Pamela fulfilling her dream of hiking to the top of Mount St. Helens. Oh, oh, this one is missing a helping verb. So it's electric eel stun, which is prey with. So it's actually option one. I apologize. So it's actually option one, not option two. All right, so we need to say which is a complete sentence, right? That has both subject as well as a verb. It says in August 2012, the Curiosity rover landed on Mars. Or do we say option two, my parents' business flourishing thanks to online advertising? So in August 2012, the Curiosity rover landed on Mars. Or do we say option two, which is my parents' business flourishing thanks to online advertising? All right, so if we were to choose the correct one, we would say in August 2012, the Curiosity rover landed on Mars. So option one is correct. All right, so it says we need to say which is a complete sentence, right? At dawn, the sailors hoisted the cargo onto the ship. So at dawn, the sailors hoisted the cargo onto the ship. Or option two, which is the undercover agent still investigating that strange case. So at dawn, the sailors hoisted the cargo onto the ship. Or option two, which is the undercover agent still investigating that strange case. And remember, a complete sentence has both subject as well as a verb. Right. And if we were to choose the correct sentence, which shows it is a completed sentence that expresses a complete thought that has both subject and a verb, right? Then we would say, at dawn, the sailors hoisted the cargo onto the ship. So option one is correct. All right, which sentence is a fragment? And remember, we said a fragment, it is either missing a subject, or it is missing a verb, or it is missing a helping verb, right? That shows a sentence fragment and it does not express a complete thought, right? It says Aesop's fables present important life lessons, often in a humorous way. Or do we say Irene already leaving to catch the plane for her week-long cruise to Porto Vallarta? So we say Aesop's fables present important life lessons, often in your humorous ways. Or Irene already leaving to catch the plane for a week-long cruise to Porto Vallarta. All right, and if we were to identify our sentence fragment within the sentence, right, we would say option two. So option two is our segment sentence fragment, right? All right, let's go to the second one, which is it a sentence or a run-on? So we need to say, is this a complete sentence or if it's a run-on, right? And remember, we said a run-on sentence, right? It is, it has two independent sentences or clauses within that one sentence, right? And it is either joined without an in punctuation or just with a comma, right? That is a run-on sentence. And then once again, a sentence, a completed sentence is a group of words that forms either complete thought, which has both subject as well as a verb. So we can fix a run-on sentence by adding our in punctuation mark, right? And then you just separate the two sentences within that one sentence. And then when we separate it into the two sentences, then at the end of the first sentence, we add our in punctuation mark. And then with the second sentence, we started by capitalizing the first word of the sentence and also our end mark. We can also fix a run on sentence by rewriting it as a compound sentence, right? And when we write it as a compound sentence, then we are going to join the two independent clauses by adding a comma as well as a conjunction. And a conjunction is words like and, but, or, and, so. That is how we can fix run on sentences. All right, so now we're going on to our test where we are going to say, is it a complete sentence or is it a run on? All right, if we look at the first one, right, the first one says, we need to say which is a run on sentence. A run on sentence, right? And it says, Casey or Cassie is an adept skier. She has trained for many years. So we need to select a run on sentence. Or is it option two, which is red green color blindness affects far more men than women? So run on sentence. Remember, it's like two independent sentences or clauses within that one sentence, right? A run on sentence. So is it Cassie is an adept skier? She has trained for many years. Or do we say red, green color blindness affects more men than women? All right, and if we want to choose our run on sentence, then we will say it is option one because we say Cassie is an adept skier, that is period. She has trained for many years. That is basically two independent clauses or sentences that is within that one sentence. All right. The next one is we need to say which is a complete sentence, right? Which has a subject and it has a verb and it expresses a complete thought. A complete sentence. It says a leap year typically occurs every 4 years. Or do we say, let's spruce up this room? New drapes would be an improvement. So we need to say which is a complete sentence. A leap year typically occurs every 4 years. Or let's spruce up this room. New drapes would be an improvement. All right, then if we were to select the complete sentence, then we would choose option one, which says a leap year typically occurs every 4 years. All right. All right, the next one says, which is a complete sentence? Does it say multiplying fractions and decimals isn't hard? I can show you how. Or the suspect forfeited his right to a trial by jury. So multiplying fractions and decimals isn't hard, or I can show you how the suspect forfeited his right to a trial by jury. And if we were to select our complete sentence, we would say that the suspect forfeited his right to a trial by jury. All right, let's do the last one. It says, which is a complete sentence? The macaroni dish tastes rather bland. Pass the salt, please. Or option two, lichens flourish in some of the most extreme environments on Earth. So macaroni dish tastes rather bland. Pass the salt, please. Or lichens flourish in some of the most extreme environments on Earth. All right, and if we were to choose our completed sentence, we would go with option two. All right, so that is the end of our lesson on sentences, fragments, and run ons. In our next lesson, we will say, is it a sentence, fragment, or a run on? So we will basically just go over what a sentence, fragment, and a run on is again. But for now, we see the sentence is a group of words that forms a complete thought. It has a subject and a verb. A sentence fragment is missing a subject, a verb, or a um, helping verb, and a run-on sentence. It is basically one sentence, but it has two independent clauses or sentence within that one sentence, and we can either fix it by writing the in punctuation, by separating it into the two sentences and adding the in punctuation, and or by writing it as a compound sentence. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade 8s, for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have a good evening further. Goodbye.